Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called for India's cooperation in the investigation into the murder of pro-Khalistan leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada has also said that it would not release the evidence over which it has said that India was involved in his death. Earlier this week, Trudeau said Ottawa has credible information linking Indian government agents to the murder of Nijjar. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with US President Joe Biden at the White House yesterday. Zelensky was there to convince American lawmakers to keep up support for Ukraine in its war with Russia. Meanwhile, Biden announced a new $325 million military aid package for Ukraine. Zelensky has now landed in Canada. He's there to meet Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and address the Parliament in Ottawa. Zelensky will also visit Toronto to meet with Canadian business leaders. There, he will pitch strengthening private sector investments in Ukraine. India's upper house of parliament, the Rajya Sabha, has unanimously passed the Women's Reservation Bill. This will grant a 33% reservation to women in the Indian Parliament's lower house or Lok Sabha and in state assemblies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called it a quote-unquote defining moment in India's history. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group says it's prepared for a ceasefire and ready to engage in political talks. This is to end its conflict with Sudan's army. RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo said this in a rare video appearance. He made the comments in a recorded video addressed to the United Nations General Assembly. War broke out between the Sudanese army and the RSF in April and has led to thousands of deaths and displacements. About 5,000 residents have been evacuated in the Nagorno-Karabakh region in Azerbaijan. They have been given temporary shelter at a makeshift Russian military facility. This was after Azerbaijan attacked the Armenian-dominated enclave earlier this week. Meanwhile, protests escalate in the Armenian capital of Yerevan. Hundreds of protesters clashed with the police, demanding the resignation of Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. They were angered by the government's inaction over the collapse of Nagorno-Karabakh's Armenian authorities. Thousands of migrants have crossed into the United States in recent days. More than 3,000 migrants have been dropped off over the last week at a California transit center. Meanwhile, many more are still arriving by bus and cargo trains to the Mexican border towns. The dramatic increase along the border marks a turning point after numbers had plummeted in recent months. This could create fresh political challenges for US President Joe Biden ahead of the elections next year. A bus carrying members of a high school marching band on a trip met with an accident in the state of New York in the US. This was after it ran off the highway and tumbled down a steep ravine. The accident killed 2 people and injured a dozen others in the bus. New York's Governor Kathy Hochul has said that a faulty front tire likely contributed to the mishap. Indigenous groups in Brazil erupted in celebration on Thursday. This is after the country's Supreme Court voted against a land bill. The proposed law aimed to impose a cut-off date for ancestral land claims. Any indigenous community that had not occupied their lands by that date would not have been allowed to claim it in the future. Now, Brazil's Supreme Court has scrapped this new bill. Indigenous leaders say that the ruling is vital to resolve some 300 pending land recognition claims. Police are investigating an arson attack in the South American nation of Chile. The attack led to the burning down of 11 pieces of forestry machinery. The Araucania region where the attack occurred has been under a state of emergency for over a year. It has seen simmering conflict between the region's indigenous community and the Chilean government. Indigenous activists say their lands are increasingly threatened by agriculture, forestry, and other industries. They blame Chile's government for failing to uphold their rights. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets in Bulgaria on Thursday. They were protesting against the policies of the pro-Western government. The protesters opposed the country's support for Ukraine in its war with Russia. Demonstrators gathered in front of the parliament building, waving flags, blowing whistles, and demanding early elections in the country. Yemen's Houthi forces displayed ballistic missiles and armed drones in a massive military parade in the capital Sana'a. Officials watched as dozens of heavy trucks passed, carrying cruise missiles and long-range armed drones. It came 2 days after Houthi negotiators left Saudi Arabia. They were there to hold talks with Saudi officials on a potential agreement to end their conflict in Yemen. In climate news, Brazil is facing an unusual heat wave during its winter months. Temperatures have crossed 40 degrees Celsius this week. Officials have urged residents to limit venturing outside and to cool off by going to the beach. Brazil's weather department says the heat wave is likely to continue till next week. Colombia's capital, Bogota, went car-free yesterday. The Colombian government enforced the day-long rule to curb air pollution in the city. Over 400,000 people used cycles for their daily commute. Over 2 million people used public transport. Colombian officials say the car-free day reduced Bogota's air pollution by 57%. In the US, air pollution peaked in the San Francisco Bay Area in the state of California. This was after smoke from wildfires in Northern California drifted and settled over the city. San Francisco officials have sounded an air pollution alert and have urged people to stay indoors. Air pollution has peaked in Serbia's capital city, Belgrade. This is due to coal mines and manufacturing plants near the capital. People have complained that they can taste and feel the air pollution. Meanwhile, Belgrade's government has issued a tender to procure over 11,000 air purifiers. Sweden's government is facing a backlash over its decision to slash its climate budget. Climate activists demonstrated against the government in Sweden's capital, Stockholm. The Nordic nation plans to slash its climate funding by over $23 million. Sweden also announced tax cuts on petrol and diesel, which will likely increase fossil fuel consumption. Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe addressed the United Nations General Assembly yesterday. He urged world leaders to set aside their differences and unite against climate change. The Sri Lankan president said that despite promising to act on climate change, developed nations have not stuck to their assurances. Treated and untreated sewage is the greatest threat to biodiversity in rivers. This is according to researchers in the UK. A new study says that sewage waters once released into rivers pollute farms and lands that are dependent on the water bodies. The research shows that even treated sewage discharge was harmful to aquatic life. Global rhinoceros numbers have increased to almost 27,000. This is after Central and Southern African nations collaborated to prevent habitat loss and poaching. The rhinos were losing grazing grounds due to rising deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa. The lack of forest cover was making the animal an easy target for poachers. However, despite an increase in global rhino numbers, the Javan and Sumatran rhinos remain close to disappearing. Now on to business and tech news. 92-year-old media mogul Rupert Murdoch stepped down as the chairman of Fox Corp and News Corp after a 7-decade stint. However, Murdoch will serve as the chairman emeritus of both the companies. His son Lachlan Murdoch will now become the sole chairman of News Corp. He'll also continue to serve as chairman and CEO of Fox. The move comes after a tumultuous year for Fox News. It had to pay $787 million to settle a defamation case against Dominion Voting Systems. The Bank of England has stopped its long run of interest rate hikes. The central bank held the interest rate at 5.25%. The decision came after data showed a surprise fall in UK inflation in August. The BOE also cut its forecast for economic growth in the July-September period to just 0.1%. This was down from an earlier forecast of 0.4%. Tech giant Cisco Systems has agreed to buy cybersecurity software firm Splunk for about $28 billion. This could become Cisco's biggest acquisition ever. The deal marks the company's major push into artificial intelligence. Cisco is expected to close the deal by the end of the third quarter of 2024. America's United Auto Workers Union and the Detroit 3 automakers are still at loggerheads. This is despite a looming deadline to expand the strikes in the US. If the strikes expand, it could further disrupt production and dent the country's growth. Ford, General Motors and Stellantis have proposed 20% raises, which the union has rejected. They're asking for a 40% pay hike. Reports say Tesla is planning to make and sell battery storage systems in India. The electric vehicle company has submitted a proposal to officials seeking incentives to build a factory. However, the Indian government has reportedly denied that request. Earlier this year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi discussed the factory proposal with Tesla CEO Elon Musk. This was during his state visit to the US. The Australian Federal Court has fined the country's second biggest lender, National Australia Bank. NAB will have to pay a penalty of $1.4 million. This is for allegedly wrongly charging customers periodic payment fees. NAB carried this out between January 2017 and July 2018. This is despite having no contractual basis to do so. The chairman of Australia's Qantas Airways has refused to step down. This is despite repeated demands by investors. Reports say investors have continued to demand his resignation amid a slew of scandals that have affected the airline. Qantas is facing a regulatory lawsuit that accuses it of breaching consumer law. This is for selling tickets for 8,000 flights even though they were cancelled. Gabriel Weinberg, the CEO of internet search engine company DuckDuckGo, testified against Google. This was during a hearing against the tech giant on Thursday. He said that DuckDuckGo struggled to grow its market share because of Google. Weinberg has accused Google of paying key companies billions of dollars to keep its search engine as default on computers or mobile devices. The flagship Apple store in China's Shanghai attracted long queues. People were there to collect their pre-ordered iPhone 15s. However, some of them were largely unimpressed by the new model. Despite strong sales, customers were, unimpressed with the lack of new features. Many compared the new iPhone to the Huawei Mate 60 Pro. Huawei's Mate 60 Pro gathered much applause earlier this month. This was for its locally made 7nm processor, which is considered a breakthrough in China's chip-making abilities. A Polish data watchdog has sued ChatGPT maker OpenAI. This is over a complaint that ChatGPT breaks the European Union's data protection law. It was made by an unnamed complainant. According to the Polish regulator, the complainant said ChatGPT did not correct false information about them. They also accused ChatGPT of delivering misleading answers to questions. Moving to sports. In cricket, pacer Anra Nokia has been ruled out of South Africa's one-day International World Cup squad. This is after the seamer suffered a lower back injury during the Australia series this month. Meanwhile, South African bowler Sisanda Magala has also been ruled out due to a knee injury. England batter Jason Roy has turned down his call-up for the ODI series against Ireland. This comes after he was dropped from the English side for the upcoming World Cup. Roy is recovering from an injury and will be replaced by uncapped Tom Kohler-Cadmore for the Ireland series. In football, Liverpool beat Austrian club Linzer ASK 3-1 at the UEFA Europa League group stage match. LASK took the lead early at their home ground with an outside-the-box screamer by Florian Flecker in the 14th minute. In the second half, Darwin Núñez scored on a penalty in the 56th to level the score. Just 8 minutes later, Liverpool's winger Luis Diaz gave the Reds a lead. Finally, Mohamed Salah scored in the 88th to seal the win for Liverpool. Brighton were handed a shock 3-2 home defeat by AEK Athens in yesterday's Europa League match. Athens scored early in the 11th minute. Brighton's João Pedro levelled the score on a penalty in the 30th minute. 10 minutes later, Athens retook the lead via a header by Milat Gacinovic. Then Brighton equalised after Pedro scored on another penalty in the 67th. But Ezekiel Pons broke Brighton's spirit with a late goal in the 84th minute, securing a hard-fought win for Athens. West Ham breezed past Serbian team TSC Backa Topolo 3-1 yesterday. The Europa League match was played at the London Stadium. The first half was scoreless as both teams struggled to find the net despite multiple attempts. The deadlock was broken in the 47th minute by TSC Backa Topolo. Then an own goal gave West Ham the opening in the 66th. After that, West Ham strikers scored 2 more goals to seal the win for the Hammers. In Formula One, Red Bull's Max Verstappen dominated the first practice session ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix. He set the record for the fastest time in practice at the Japanese track. Ferrari's Carlos Sainz came second and McLaren's Lando Norris finished third. The Japanese Grand Prix will take place on the 24th of September. After dealing with visa delays, MotoGP riders have finally arrived in India. This includes Honda's 6-time world champion Marc Marquez and his team. World number 12 Aprilia rider Alex Espargaro has also made it to the country. The MotoGP Grand Prix of India is on the 24th of September. It will be held in Greater Noida, which is near the Indian capital, New Delhi. In tennis, India will face Pakistan in the Davis Cup 2024. Pakistan has been designated as the host nation for the matches. Pakistan's Tennis Federation says they will not play at a neutral venue. In 2019, India had refused to play in Pakistan, citing security concerns. The matches took place in a neutral venue, which was Kazakhstan. Pakistan says it is hoping that the Indian tennis squad will travel to their nation. India currently lead Pakistan 7-0 in head-to-head matchups in the Davis Cup. 8 out of the 11 members of India's Wushu martial art contingent arrived in China for the Asian Games. 3 athletes, however, have been held back in New Delhi as they did not receive travel credentials. The 3 Wushu players belong to the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. In July, India protested after the same athletes from Arunachal were handed stapled visas by China. The Wushu players say they hope to join their team ahead of their matches, which begin on the 24th of September. In wrestling, India's Antim Panghal won bronze in the 53 kg category at the World Championships. 19-year-old Panghal beat her Swedish opponent 16-6 by technical superiority. With the win, Panghal has become the first Indian wrestler to qualify for the Paris 2024 Olympics. In entertainment news, actor Sophie Turner sued her estranged pop star husband Joe Jonas. Turner sued forces Jonas to turn over the passports of their daughters. Turner, in her petition, said she wants to take the kids back to England. That is where the couple had earlier planned to raise their daughters. Turner was served with divorce papers earlier this month after 4 years of marriage to Joe Jonas. Her petition was filed in a federal court in New York under the child abduction clauses of the Hague Convention. The Northern California Coroner's Office said that actor Angus Cloud died of an acute intoxication of cocaine, meth, fentanyl, and other substances. Cloud was declared dead at his parents' home on July 31st in Oakland. He was 25 years old at the time of his death. Cloud starred as the drug dealer Fezco O'Neill in the HBO series Euphoria. Disgraced Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 of forcible confinement ahead of his trial in Toronto next week. The 82-year-old founder of Nygard International has been held in prison since his arrest in 2020. He's being tried for alleged crimes going as far back as the 1980s. Nygard also faces similar charges in Quebec and Manitoba. He also faces extradition to the United States, where he's accused of raping dozens of women and girls, racketeering and trafficking. A woman has alleged that comedian and actor Russell Brand exposed himself to her and then laughed about it on BBC Radio 2 minutes later. The woman told the BBC that the incident happened in 2008 in Los Angeles when she was working in the same building as the corporation. The latest statement comes in the wake of a slew of sexual assault allegations by 4 women against Russell Brand. The comedian has denied all allegations against him. The woman who made the latest claims has not made a formal complaint yet. Hollywood studios and striking screenwriters resumed talks that could potentially put an end to the nearly 5-month dispute. The strike has brought many film and television productions to a halt. Top entertainment CEOs, including Disney's Bob Iger, Warner Bros. Discovery's David Zaslav, Universal's Donna Langley and Netflix's Ted Sarandos were present at the meeting. As the meeting continued, reports emerged suggesting that writers and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, or the AMPTP, were near an agreement and hoped to finalize the deal. However, there has been no confirmation of this. The two sides have been divided on issues of pay, the size of the writing staff on shows, and the use of artificial intelligence for scripts. Hollywood workers held a parking lot flea market in Los Angeles as the twin strikes that shut down most scripted productions across the city continue to bite economically. Several crew members have been out of work for months. The strike's economic toll is estimated to hit at least $5 billion in California and other production-heavy states like Georgia and New Mexico. A member of K-pop juggernaut BTS, Suga, started his mandatory alternative service. Suga was declared unfit for the regular military service due to health reasons. He will work as a social service agent instead. All able-bodied South Korean men must serve at least 18 months in the military. After a year-long debate about whether BTS deserved an exemption, Jin, the oldest member of the group, began his service in December. BTS has become a global cultural phenomenon, selling out stadiums and dominating charts while taking in billions for the South Korean economy. Fast and Furious star Sung Kang has made his directorial debut. The 51-year-old actor, known for playing Han Lu in the long-running car action franchise, has started with a light-hearted monster comedy called Shaky Shivers. The film got a one-night-only theatrical release on Thursday. He says making the movie on a small budget in 2021 and 2022 was a process full of lessons that he hopes to apply to future filmmaking projects. Sung Kang is already eyeing his next movie, directing a comedic coming-of-age script called Only in America, which he says he wrote about his own childhood. As Australian University will host an academic symposium on pop star Taylor Swift, which will explore her impact on gender, literature, the economy and music industry. Scholars will gather at the Melbourne University for Swiftposium 2024 in February to delve into a broad range of academic disciplines related to the 33-year-old pop icon. The symposium is being organised along with 6 universities across Australia and New Zealand. Taylor Swift is taking a break from her wildly popular international tour that began in March. She's expected to resume performances in November. New Captain America is back home and back at an old job repairing roofs. TV and movie actor Anthony Mackie, who is the new Captain America in the season finale of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, took part in a program to help people needing roof repairs and replacements after natural disasters. The New Orleans-born Mackie pitched in with the members of the non-profit Rebuilding Together New Orleans. They were working at the home of an 81-year-old veteran whose roof was damaged by Hurricane Ida in 2021.